Hello. Welcome to the live stream of our workshop for Peace Corps Albania invitees to learn about how to use digital mapping. We're going to wait just a few minutes to give everyone a chance to hop on and join the Hangout, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, if you're watching our recorded version of this, which will be posted on YouTube after the broadcast. Welcome to the live stream of our workshop. Sorry about that. Okay, so anyways, if you're watching the live stream, make sure you are sending in your questions and answers from the Q&A function. And yeah, please ask for your patience, and we'll start in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, well, as it is 10 a.m., we're going to get started. I see we have 4 viewers in on the workshop now. I do want to say I'd love to have a few of you join as speakers in this so that I'm not the only one who's talking. So if you would like to join in, you won't have to say much, but it'd be great to have a few of you in on this conversation with me instead of just watching the live stream. So if you'd be interested in doing that, please go ahead and check out the comment that I just posted on the event page. Go ahead and click that link, and then you can join the Hangout, and you'll be able to have a voice in this conversation. Awesome. It looks like we had someone just join. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm great, thank you. It's great to meet you. Where are you joining us from?
Sacramento, California.
Okay, excellent. Well, I guess we'll get started. I hope everyone was able to make an account at openstreetmap.org. I've posted a few links in this showcase function, so you can sort of toggle between the Q&A options and then this showcase, which looks like a pair of yellow tags maybe on your screen. And so we've got all the links for the workshop up there. So just taking care of some housekeeping, you'll want to be aware of the showcase links function and then this Q&A function as well. So please just be posting those questions live as we go along, and I will address them during the workshop. Okay, I'm going to turn to screen sharing so you'll be able to follow along with me as I teach you this mapping skill. And I will keep an eye on the question and answer sidebar as we go. So let me turn on screen sharing. All right. So first we're going to do is check out this website. And please just follow along with me on your computers as we go. We're going to go to www.openstreetmap.org. The link is also over in the showcase sidebar. All right. So we're going to be using a few different websites today, and I'll explain each one. But this is the main one to know, and it's a digital wiki map of the world. So think of the Wikipedia of maps, or sort of a Google Doc of a world map that, as we speak, people around the world are contributing to. Sort of like Google Maps, except all of the data within the map is free and accessible to everyone because it's open sourced and it's crowdsourced. So go ahead and log into OpenStreetMap if you haven't already. And then we're going to pop over to this website called the OSM Tasking Manager. And you'll also see this link in the showcase. But if you want to just type in the URL, you can go to tasks.hotosm.org. Okay, and we're going to be working on a task that I set up from this website. We're going to be mapping Tirana. Please, Michael, correct me if I didn't pronounce that correctly. I'm sure you all know more about Albania than I do at this point. We're going to be mapping part of the capital of Albania, so you'll get to know that area a little bit better today. So we have a lot of different Peace Corps tasks up on this website. If you want to check them out, you can just type in Peace Corps to that search bar under Projects. And these will all make a lot more sense to you once we get going. But I want to get everyone started on mapping and contributing to the task, and then I'll explain more about why we're actually doing this. All right, so we're going to work on this task right here, number 926, Peace Corps Albania. So if you're following along or watching the recording, go ahead and click on task number 926. Okay, so here you can see a chunk of OpenStreetMap, which is Tirana, the capital of Albania. And I've just selected a region or an area of the city. You can see this blue outline. That's what I selected. And then this Tasking Manager website turned it into a grid of squares. This essentially just organizes the map for us so that we can all be mapping the same part of the city at the same time without mapping the same exact geographical location. So go ahead and take a look over here under description. Whenever you're mapping a task through this tasking manager for OpenStreetMap, you'll be able to see a description. And all of the tasks here are humanitarian. HOT, you can see in the URL, stands for Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team. So you'll always be able to see the humanitarian context for why someone might join in on mapping this part of the world. You can also check out instructions. So we see that today we want to work on tracing buildings and roads. So that's pretty simple. When we save, we're going to be saving with this hashtag Peace Corps and hashtag Peace Corps Albania, but that will happen automatically for us. So we're going to jump right over to contribute. And at this point, I'd ask everyone to just click any square on the map. Doesn't matter which one. All right, and once you click your square, it should turn blue like this. And then go ahead and click on Start Mapping. I'm going to pop back to the Hangout for a second just to see if we have any questions, make sure everyone's following along okay. All right, it looks like someone can't get on the broadcast. All right, so Joe can't get on the broadcast. I'm just going to pop over to the comment section of the event and try to get her started. And then in the meantime, yeah, so if you could just hold tight for a second, that would be awesome. And make sure you have one of those squares selected. All right, hopefully that will help you out. Let's go back to this tasking manager. All right, so next step we're going to do is click this Edit with ID Editor button. That's just one function of OpenStreetMap, the easiest one. It's great for beginners to start editing the map. One tip that Joe from your training class helped me figure out is this won't work if you're using Internet Explorer. So I apologize. I should have said that at the beginning. But if you're using Internet Explorer, please try using Firefox or Chrome to do your mapping. You can stick with the Hangout on Explorer if you want. Okay, so now I have this purple line, this purple square. It's outlining part of the city. This is the square that I'm going to be mapping. I don't want to go outside of my square because it could mess up other people who might be mapping right next to me when everyone goes to save their work. So I'm just going to keep zooming in a little bit and check out this square. I've got some buildings, some roads. Parts of it have already been mapped. I can see there's these lines drawn on some of the roads. Okay, so I'm going to start by tracing some buildings. And we're essentially today just going to do mindless data entry, which doesn't sound very glamorous, to be sure, but I will explain why that's really critical to the international development context. So I've drawn a square around my building using this area function. I'll do that again in case anyone missed it back into my task. My Wi-Fi might be a little bit slow because we're hosting a lot of Hangouts right now at headquarters. Everyone's trying to get on the bandwidth. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to retrace that building since I wasn't able to save my edit. So if everyone could trace a building along with me in your task, that would be fantastic. Go ahead and click on this area button right at the top. And then just click on, the four corners of your building. Most of these are going to be square or rectangular. Double click once you've finished tracing. And then we also want to label our buildings. Now, I have no idea if this is an apartment building or an office or a mall. So I'm just going to come over here to feature type, click building, and then building again. And that's okay. Similar to Wikipedia, this map is constantly being refined by people who might have more knowledge than I do. So, but it's really helpful to just draw the basic infrastructure of the city, and then people that are more familiar with the city can always go back in and change the feature type, if they know that it's a commercial building, for example. So I'm going to save my work. By clicking on that white save button, we can see our hashtags are all good to go, and then I'm going to click the blue save button. And now I've made and edit to this wiki map of the world. You don't have to save after every single edit. I usually save, about every 10 edits or so in order to not lose my work. So please go ahead, start mapping some buildings the way that we just did. I think a few people have some questions for me. They might be having a hard time joining the Hangout. So I'm going to answer those. And in the meantime, I'd love for you to just try your hand at mapping a few buildings and saving. This is a very hands-on workshop, so this is going exactly as it should. So please just take a few minutes and work on your map. All right, and then for those of you who are viewing but are not actually part of the Hangout yet, I'm going to post the link again so you could try to join us and try putting it in the showcase. Oh, looks like that just led us to a sign in for Google. That's all right. But if you could go to that comment section or your email I just sent you to actually join the Hangout, so we could have some more voices in on that conversation. I really enjoy it. Don't just leave poor Michael hanging here as the only one with me on the Hangout. So again, the link is right under the event, or it's in your email addresses. And
I
again,
didn't realize I'm the only one that can talk then.
You are. I'm trying to get other people to join us.
Got it. I was wondering why I was the only person. I've done Hangouts before, but I was really unsure why I was the only one.
Yeah, exactly. The reason we're doing air is because with a normal Hangout, we could only have 10 people even view the Hangout at all. So my hope is that we'll get 10 people on the Hangout, but then everyone else will still be able to watch the live stream or the recording. So we'll see. Maybe people will join us. Yeah. Or maybe people are being shy.
Okay. So when you were referring to Michael, that was me. Got it.
Yeah, that's you. Excellent. All right. I'm going to take a look at the questions. Looks like we don't have anything so far. If things are going okay for folks on the mapping, maybe could you just post that as a question, whether you were able to trace a building or not? That would be really helpful for me, so I can, make sure I'm going at an appropriate pace during this workshop. So go ahead and just post as a question whether you were able to trace some buildings or if you weren't. I'm going to head back to my screen share and to my map. All right, and now I'm going to show you all how you can trace a line or a road using a line. It's great. A lot of these roads have already been traced, but it looks like I can see one right here that I can add to. Okay, so I'm going to press this line button, and I always want to make sure that I'm connecting my lines because in reality these roads do connect with each other, so we want our map to reflect that. So in order to make sure these connect, I'm going to start by clicking on this pre-existing red line, and I'm just going to use a few points to trace down. I'm not sure if my road extends any further than that. I believe it probably does. This looks like we have still some buildings going down here. They would need a road in front of them. Okay, so once I'm done tracing my road, I'm going to double click, just like we did with the buildings, and then I'm going to check out. I think these two roads are probably pretty similar. So I'm going to see what this was labeled as, a residential road. Okay, that makes sense. And it seems to me like this is a residential area too. So I'm going to come over here to road and click residential road. Now remember, just like Wikipedia, if I messed up and that's not an actually a residential road, that's okay. I want to do a good job while I'm doing this map and be careful and thorough, but I also don't need to know everything, and it doesn't, because this is all crowdsourced. Someone will come in and correct my work if I've misled. So we're just going to work on our mapping for a little while. I'm going to stop talking. Feel free to send in your questions or join us if you want to speak your questions out loud or join the conversation. And I'm just going to have my map up on my screen share, and we can all map for a few minutes. Once you really start getting the hang of things, as far as tracing buildings goes, there's a lot of cool keyboard shortcuts that will, make you a much more efficient mapper. So one in particular that's really good to use is the squaring out function. So when you're drawing a building, like I've just done here, I'm going to label it as building. Then if I hit the S, just the S key on my keyboard, I'll make all of my angles 90 degrees, which really helps because I'm no good at drawing. There are also keyboard shortcuts for each of these buttons. You can hover over them to see. For area, for drawing a building, it's 3, so I can just hit 3 and then go right into drawing a building. And then I'll hit S to square out my corners and save my work. So Michael, what sector of volunteer will you be?
I'll be a teacher trainer at a university.
Wow, that's excellent. Have you been a teacher before? Is that what you do right here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I teach at California State University, Sacramento right now.
Wow, that's incredible. And are most of your colleagues that are going to Albania, are they also going to be teachers or teacher trainers?
As far as I know, there's four of us that are teacher trainers, and then the rest are TEFL volunteers. As far as the English teaching cohort is concerned, but I'm actually
Okay,
not really sure how many there are total.
sure, sure. Um, Most of my work has been primarily just with volunteers and posts in sub-Saharan Africa before this, so I'm also learning a lot about sort of expanding out of just Peace Corps Africa into other regions. So yeah, that's really good to know. I'm curious to learn more. I was a volunteer in Guinea, West Africa, from
Oh,
2012
I have a
2014.
friend from Guinea. I was a mentor for the Fulbright scholars, the Herbert H. Humphreys, and
Wow,
one of them was from Guinea, and then we had another guy from Mauritania, which is rather close too.
sure, that's awesome. All right, so hopefully you're all making some progress on your maps. There's a lot to map within these squares. It's very dense and urban, obviously. So that's okay. Please don't get discouraged. If you're tired of your task, you can always select another one and come back later, or someone else will finish the one you're working on. I'll also show you a trick. If you feel like your square is just way too big, you can come back to this tasking manager and click split. And that will split your square up into 4 smaller squares. Just break it up, make it a little bit easier to map. All right, so I'm going to keep mapping, and I hope you all do too. And then at the same time, I'd like to start a conversation about why we're even doing this on a Friday morning, a week before you head out to your post. So we currently have quite a few volunteers in the field using this OpenStreetMap tool and other digital mapping tools in their work, and they've had a lot of success with it. We started out by doing these workshops in sub-Saharan African posts. There's a malaria training 3 times a year that's held in Senegal for Peace Corps, and volunteers and staff from all over the continent come and learn about everything malaria for 10 very intensive days. And this is one of the sessions that historically has been held at that boot camp, teaching volunteers and staff members how to use digital mapping tools in their work. And volunteers in those posts have really just taken these tools and implemented them into their work in really fantastic and intelligent ways. So we're trying and hoping to expand the use of these mapping tools to other Peace Corps regions. And so you all are the first group of invitees that our office is training that's outside of the Africa region. So that's pretty exciting and also a little scary for me. I've actually never even mapped such a dense urban setting like this before, so I'm also learning a lot as we go. But I'll talk about just a few of the use cases that we have so far. So one of my favorite stories is Teresa Gover and Mike Banfield. They are 2 current volunteers in Botswana. And Teresa attended the Stomp Boot Camp, actually with me when I was a volunteer. And she went back to her site, and you learn so much at boot camp, it can be kind of overwhelming. So I forgot a little bit about these mapping tools until she had attended Botswana's National Malaria Conference. And there, Folks from the Ministry of Health and the National Malaria Program kept talking about mapping as a really important component of eliminating malaria in Botswana as the country moves forward. So she remembered these tools. She went back to her community, and the first thing she wanted and needed was just a base layer map of her community, which is exactly what we're doing today for Tirana. So she made a YouTube video, and on it she taught her friends how to do exactly what we're doing today. As you can see, it's really easy. I taught you in just a few minutes. This sort of mindless data entry, just tracing over satellite imagery. So they, with their American internet connections, they built up the base layer map of her site. And then a few months later, there was an indoor residual spraying campaign in her community. Essentially, teams went around and sprayed insecticide on the interiors of homes. And Teresa knew that if they reached 80% of the homes in her community, they would have a shot at breaking the cycle of malaria transmission. All right, so how to actually measure that? Well, you really need a map and data about all the buildings in a community, which didn't exist until Teresa created the OpenStreetMap of her community. So using this very map, if you were just to zoom out and pop into Botswana, you would see the map of her community. She worked with another volunteer and a few Botswanian volunteers from the health center, and they did a survey using GPS devices that they borrowed, and they were able to mark exactly which houses had been sprayed, which houses hadn't, and why. So at the end of the day, they had GPS coordinates and a really accurate map of all the houses that hadn't been sprayed, simply because no one was home when the teams came around to do the spraying. Okay, so there's probably a good shot that if you go back to those houses, they're not going to refuse, and you can probably get that house sprayed. And they were able to show that if, Botswana's National Malaria Program spent just a little bit more money and did a very targeted follow-up campaign, they'd be able to reach that 80% mark. But it would not have been possible without the OpenStreetMap of her community, because, generally, if it's a Peace Corps country, it's undermapped. It might exist on Google Maps, maybe not. More likely than not, there's just no digital map of most of the communities where our volunteers are serving, which is a big disservice to those communities, as well as a barrier for volunteers when they're trying to plan and implement projects. So that's a really interesting use case. I can talk about more as we move forward, but really you all are our first sort of cohort of volunteers in the Europe region of Peace Corps that will be learning this map and hopefully, or learning these skills and hopefully implementing them. So I'll be really curious to see moving forward how you all take these tools and use them in your work. All right. So I'm going to pop back over to the Hangout and see if we have any questions. All right, Mohammed says it's working great for me. All right, awesome. Thanks, Mohammed. And it looks like we have a few more people that joined in. FJ, hi, welcome to the Hangout.
Hello.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. Where are you joining us from?
Ventura County, California, just north of LA.
Okay, excellent. It's good to meet you. And then it looks like we have Adam joined us as well. Adam, we can't see you, and it looks like you're on mute. So if you want to unmute yourself and maybe share your video, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to the group.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm Adam, calling.
Oh, you cut out for just a second. Could you say that again?
Oh, my name's Adam. I'm calling in from Bozeman, Montana.
Okay, awesome. It's great to meet you. So Adam and everyone else that's actually in on the call, here at the bottom of the screen, would you mind going to the screen sharing function and sharing your screens with us if you're on OpenStreetMap? That way everyone who is watching the broadcast can see other people doing the mapping, and I can also just do like a spot check of how you're doing with the mapping, if you feel comfortable. If not, that's okay too. It's just the green button on the left side of your Hangout that says screen share. So if you want to do that, that'd be great. I can look at how you're doing and also give you pointers for your mapping. If anyone else wants me to take a look at how they're doing on the mapping and maybe give some pointers, go ahead and just join in on the actual Hangout and turn on your screen sharing. All right, so I'm going to keep moving ahead. I'm almost done with my task here. I'm just going to trace a few more buildings. And then I'll show you all how to mark your task as done and move on to a new one. So go ahead and keep mapping. Join the Hangout and screen share with us if you want me to take a look at what you're doing and just make sure that you're doing everything correctly. Okay. This imagery is a little bit grainy, so it's hard to tell what some of these things are. It's getting a little confusing over in this corner, so I might just trace one or two more of these squares that I'm pretty sure are buildings. And then I'm going to get out of this square and join another one. All right, so I'm just going to review my work one more time. Looking pretty good. Add a road here. All right, so I'm feeling good about my square. I think I'm done. I also know that if I missed anything, my work will be validated by someone later. So they can always, send me an alert, hey, you missed this building, go back in and fix it. But I'm going to, for now, mark this task as done. Oops, sorry, I forgot to turn my screen share back on. All right, so I'll show you how to do that one more time. I'm going to just go into this square. And once I have my square open, if I'm feeling comfortable that I finished it, I can just come over here and mark the task as done, which is what I just did for this gold square right here. So looking at this legend, all right, we see it's gold, so that means it's done. And then I'm just going to pop into the square right next to it and start editing with my ID editor. Okay, so while we're continuing to work on our map, I'm going to run you through just a few more current use cases for volunteers who are in the field right now, and then sort of just walk you through the steps of how you would start using these tools once you get to your community in Albania. So if I can pull up a list. These are not all of the current volunteers that are using mapping in their communities. They're just the ones that have been in communication with our office. But if I go back to that tasking manager and then I just search for the keyword Peace Corps in the search bar, I'll see all of these different mapping tasks come up. So we've got a few from Senegal. A group of malaria volunteers in Senegal is asking for help in creating a baseline map of 2 of their regions, and eventually once they have their baseline map built up, just like we're doing today, they're going to use a different tool called Mapbox. I'll talk more about that later. And they're going to be able to create private layers on top of this base layer map. So they'll have a private account in Mapbox, and then they are going to create a layer that shows all of the trained malaria community health workers in the region and all of the potential malaria counterparts for volunteers in that region. So that whenever a new volunteer comes to Senegal, or if a current volunteer, is primarily working on business advising or agriculture and wants to do a secondary project related to malaria, they'll be able to access this map that will be shared, to select people, as opposed to OpenStreetMap, which is completely public and available to everyone. And they'll be able to, go to towns around them or to their town, click on a point and say, oh, here's a trained community health worker. They live 2 kilometers from me, and here's their phone number, so I'm going to call them up to get some help on my secondary project. There's a volunteer right now in Shoshong, Botswana, and they're going to use the OpenStreetMap base layer, and then they're going to use Mapbox to build additional layers that will show all of the ARV, so antiretroviral treatment centers for people living with HIV/AIDS, and all of the health facilities in the area. And they're going to be able to analyze if those facilities are in locations that are truly accessible to everyone in the local population. So they'll be able to use the OpenStreetMap data to make sure that every health facility is within 5 kilometers, or that every resident is within 5 kilometers of a health facility, and that the ARV treatment centers are easy to reach. Another volunteer in Botswana is just doing some basic geographical reconnaissance for the National Malaria Program. So they just need a building count, how many houses and how many buildings are located in this town. Again, none of this data is available without a basic base layer map on OpenStreetMap. We've got another volunteer in Botswana who is going to use her base layer map, and she's going to create private layers that will show all of the condom dispensaries in her town, and then another layer that will show all of the HIV/AIDS transmission hotspots in the area. She'll be able to compare the two and work with the Ministry of Health to make sure that they are handing out condoms where they're needed most, so near nightclubs, brothels, things like that. There's a volunteer in Nicaragua, and he is using his map simply to teach university students how to map and why maps are important. Their town is really underrepresented on Google Maps, and they're trying to promote local tourism, so they'll be able to use OpenStreetMap first to train people in the local community on how to make a digital map, and then also to promote tourism in the area. So those are just a few examples. A lot of them are based on health, though there is the one volunteer in Nicaragua who's working with high school and university students to teach them these mapping skills. And so I'll be really curious to see moving forward, since I think most or maybe all of you are in the education sector, how you figure out ways that this could be useful in your education projects.
A quick question.
Sure.
Because I got a little hung up when we first started doing all this. Where are you finding those projects?
Sure. So if you go to tasks.hotosm.org, it should be in the showcase. So on this left side of the screen, there's like some gold tag looking things that say showcase. I'm going to go back to screen share to show you. It gets kind of funky when I do that, but just real quick, so these gold tags, and then over here are the different links that I've put up. So if you just go to this one, the OSM Tasking Manager, and then under projects, just type in Peace Corps, and you'll be able to see all those examples.
The OSM Task Manager?
Yep. OSM being just OpenStreetMap.
Right.
Yeah. Did that work okay?
Yay, found it.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Yeah, so go ahead and check those out to get some ideas. In preparation for this workshop, I did attend another workshop the other day. There was a group of individuals who received a grant from the Gates Foundation and to do a project around mapping, open data, and education in Kenya. So it's pretty amazing what they did. They first, just like we're doing right now, had to build out the OpenStreetMap base layer. They chose a slum in Kenya called Kibera. It's very heavily studied, but there also were a lot of schools in a small geographic area, so that made their project both easier logistically and more meaningful for the local population. So they built out basically the base layer of this slum, traced every building, water source, footpath, etc. And then they created this open data set with information about all of the different schools. So they found that Kenya's Ministry of Education thought there were only a few schools in this whole slum. They found over 300 informal and private schools that the government really didn't know anything about. And so for the past 5 years, they've been working with these schools, like hand in hand, getting information from them about their number of students, number of toilets, if they have a feeding program, how many of their teachers are actually trained, all of the things that really matter to parents when they're searching for a school. And here in the US, we sort of just take for granted, you know, if we're going to pick a neighborhood to live in, we'll be able to find resources online, you know, to get more information about that school district and make an informed choice about our kids' education. Obviously, the parents in Kibera didn't have access to anything like that before this Open Schools Kenya project. And now they can go online, and then they can also go to a printed resource that's hanging up in all of the schools and look at you know, a real-time, up-to-date map of the community with all of the schools, and they can click on a point on the map and get a school profile to really choose the school that's going to be best for their kids. So that was really amazing. I thought that was an excellent example of how useful this can be within the education sector. You know, so I'll stop talking and just let everyone map for a little while. I'm by no means an education expert. I was a health volunteer and also did some small business advising. So I could list a million ways this would be helpful for health volunteers. But this says, these activities have never been about telling volunteers how to use the mapping tools. What we've always focused on as an office is teaching volunteers and invitees these tools, and then staying in communication with you to see how you use these tools in creative ways in your work. All right, looks like we're getting about to the hour mark. We might even wrap up early. Maybe we'll stick on for another half hour or so, depending on how comfortable you are feeling with the mapping. But go ahead and keep mapping, and I'm just going to show you that Mapbox tool that I talked about. So if I go to mapbox.com. I'm going to sign into my account. go to my projects. So I created just a sample of my old site in Guinea. I'm going to pull it up. Right. So here is the village of Tunturun in Guinea. And you can see under this layer of the map where we have this like colorful red line and all these different points are just a bunch of gray buildings and some white roads and paths. That is the OpenStreetMap layer of this larger map. So if I had not first village on OpenStreetMap, none of these houses or lines, like these roads and footpaths, would be showing up on Mapbox. Same for any tool similar to Mapbox that you could use. There's quite a few. QGIS and Esri come to mind. Mapbox is probably the easiest for beginners. So, moving forward, if you had a project in mind to map all of the different community resources for your students, so like youth centers, health clinics that cater to youth, good study spots, that sort of thing that you could then share with your students, you could go into Mapbox and create that map, and you could print out a copy of it or share it online with your students. So they could really easily locate, different resources that you had identified for them. So I basically created points, and once I click on a point, I can get more detailed information. So I labeled this as a water source, and I can see in the detail it's actually a tap, so that's good to know. I have the mosque of my community labeled here, and I added in the name of Imam and his phone number. I have our local health clinic with all of the different staff members of the clinics, and I could put their phone numbers in, and I have the different services that are offered at the health clinic. I have the local government office with the sous-préfet, which is just a French word for kind of, the local government bureaucrat who's in the village. I could have put his phone number if I wanted to. I have the local food shops with the different products that are available, the taxi stand with the price to my nearest regional capital, all sorts of things. I drew a path from my old house to the health center and to my host family's house. And then if I zoom out, I drew a larger area around the entire catchment zone for the health center. So this would be the entire population who would go to this specific health center, and who the health center should be visiting to give child vaccinations, things like that. So this is just an example, sorts of ways to add color, icons, and detail to your private map, and then you could share this map layer with the select people that you wanted to. One important thing, if you're going to be sharing a map, of course, you never want to put your personal identifying information on your map. So we ask that you would never label your house, or put your phone number or something like that. And then if I only made this for demonstration purposes. If I was actually going to be sharing out this map with lots of people and I made up these phone numbers, I would have asked my community members for permission to use their phone numbers. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. It's a safety concern. We never would want you to label your house on a map that you're going to be sharing with other people. Even if it's just with your counterpart and your counterpart knows where you live anyways, you never know who they might end up sharing that map with as well. So just a note to make sure you're keeping yourself safe and you're having permission of your community members if you want to put any sort of identifying information on your map box. Does anyone have any questions about like the difference between Mapbox and OpenStreetMap, or how the two are connected? So if Wikipedia is like or if OpenStreetMap is like the Wikipedia maps, then Mapbox is, like your college paper that you wrote. Wikipedia shouldn't be your source, but we'll just pretend that it is. That's more customized and it's not publicly available.
This is Mike. Can I add something too?
Sure, that'd be great.
I know because I used to work with a lot of volunteers here in Sacramento, and one of our volunteers, he volunteered during the Haitian earthquake, and so what he did was he mapped all the resources, or helped map the resources on OpenStreetMaps of all the resources during disaster. And so we had a cohort that up here in Sacramento that helped him map all the resources. So even if OpenStreetMaps isn't something that we necessarily use in our Peace Corps and Peace Corps projects and Peace Corps life, I mean, if anything happens disaster-wise, where resources are really needed, then the skill of just being able to use OpenStreetMaps is really essential to getting people and resources connected.
That's an excellent story. That's really cool. So did you like know how to use OpenStreetMap before this session?
I went in, I think I made a bike trail once that's near my house, but I've never actually gone through and done anything else. I've never done roads or anything. I just saw that there was a missing bike trail, and I was messing around with it and did it just out of sheer curiosity. But yeah, so yes, and yes, I've had experience with it. No, I didn't really know how to do it though.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing that example. That's a really important point too. So there, just to build off of that, there are thousands of people around the world who are not working in international development, don't really have a connection to, these sort of developing countries, but who just have learned how to map at mapping parties or whatever it might be, and they just go into that humanitarian tasking manager, and they'll just select a task and work on tracing satellite imagery, kind of as their volunteer work or their contribution to the work of the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders or whoever it might be. So yeah, even if you're not you don't even have to just map Albania. There are tasks up right now. People need help mapping Malawi because of the floods that just happened. There are still some Ebola mapping tasks, etc. So OpenStreetMap is becoming bigger and bigger every day, and there are communities all over the world of people who just get together to map, wherever they choose to. And that's going into that bigger picture that Mike presented to us. During the Ebola crisis, there was this crisis within a crisis around mapping, because Doctors Without Borders and Red Cross couldn't do the contact tracing that they needed to, or just track down people that they thought might have Ebola and find their villages to try and isolate them, because they didn't have any maps of Liberia, for example, that worked on a GPS or worked on a computer. Yeah, they had the satellite imagery, but that's not useful when you're out in the field. And so very quickly they mobilized the OpenStreetMap community to map the 3 West African countries that were affected. But it's really a shame when you think about all of the volunteers that Peace Corps has had in those 3 countries, over the past few decades. And obviously these tools have just recently become available. But if volunteers just always made a practice of mapping their sites on OpenStreetMap, then when the next natural disaster like in Haiti or health disaster like Ebola, struck a volunteer's site, as it is bound to do for our Peace Corps countries in the future, there wouldn't be such a mapping crisis. And who better to map a local community than like a Peace Corps volunteer and their counterpart who already know the community so well. So it might feel random that we're just like mapping these neighborhoods in Tirana that I've never been to. Maybe you'll be to in a few weeks, but we don't know anything about them. But this is still helpful to Albania because you never know who's working in Albania that would need a map of the city, or whatever kind of crisis might strike, that an organization or the Albanian government would need a digital map of the city.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you were showing about like the healthcare center, and then you made the border for like that would be the area that would go to that healthcare center.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about finding out the boundaries for that?
That's a really good question. So, like, to be honest, the sample I showed you, I made once I was back here in the States, so that was made up. But I know that if I had created it when I was at my health clinic in Guinea, working with my counterpart who was like the head of the health center, he had printed maps that showed that information. So the health center or the health ministry in Guinea had determined like these catchment zones and had created maps that were static. They were on a computer, but they were not, dynamic and easily updated and edited like OpenStreetMap was. But they did print them and send them to all the health centers, so the health center would know, exactly what populations they needed to be treating. So I would have just asked him for a copy of those maps. So, like, if you wanted to draw the school district zone for your school, I'm sure you could work with the principal or someone, and they probably do have a very static, like, printed map of that information. You could make it more dynamic for them and really easy to update every year if their boundaries change. Same with the health center. Probably the head of a clinic or a hospital would have that information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's just how do you find out the details about like the community that you're creating the map for? It's just asking the local community members. So this project I talked about in Kenya, I'll go to the website, openschoolskenya.org. Like, they had no idea how many students attended each school or even where all the schools were located. So they just spent 5 years collecting all that data. You wouldn't need to spend that much time. Hopefully for your projects you wouldn't have that much time. But I mean, they created like the first accurate record of all of these schools that ever existed. And they did it just by going door to door to schools and asking, the questions. So this is the OpenStreetMap of the slum. All of these points are schools. It's like a crazy amount of schools for that small area, but they're almost all at capacity. And here's all the data they collected. It wasn't always available or didn't exist for every school. Most of them don't have addresses or emails, but they do have their student information, etc. So, like, this is definitely an activity that you would complete, with a counterpart or other members of your community. Our ultimate goal is to have Peace Corps communities mapping themselves, and just having volunteers do the skill transfer, which is what Peace Corps is always focused on anyways. So do you guys know anything about your assignments or where you'll be living in Albania? Have any of you been there before?
I haven't. I know that we're meeting in Philadelphia on the 12th, and we'll be leaving for Albania on the 14th, arriving on the 15th, so Sunday. And I think we're in a hotel for a week, and then we're going to our host families. But that's pretty much all I know.
Yeah, cool. Are you going to learn Albanian then during training?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Have you guys started working on that yet?
I know how to say slow down. That's it.
That's a good one. That would be good for like public transportation drivers.
Oh, I meant for like speaking.
Oh, for speaking. Oh,
it might
that's
work
also
both
useful.
ways as it does in English, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know if Albanian is on Duolingo, but a lot of them by Duolingo lately. At least for French and Spanish. I'm not sure about Albanian, but that might be worth checking out too. It's like the language learning app, the most popular in the world right now. It's all free. All right, so now we're going to see who's completed a task. All right, it looks like I'm the only one who's completed a square so far, which is fine. I'm not saying that to call anyone out, but if you haven't, you might want to consider going back and splitting your square into smaller tasks to make it easier. And then you can always look over at stats and whoever has finished a square. I finished them because I'm in. And then we'll just sort of hang out, keep mapping. I'm going to leave the floor open for any questions you guys might have about Peace Corps in general. I served in a very different context from you, but you know, a lot of the themes of being away from home, integrating into a new community are pretty universal. So feel free to ask any questions you might have about my experiences or working at headquarters after you're done being a volunteer. And then I would just ask that you do two things for me. First, in the questions bar, if you wouldn't mind, or for those of you who are actually on the Hangout in the chat function, if you could type your name and your OpenStreetMap username into the chat or the questions. That'll just sort of be our like sign in and for the day, so I can keep track of that. If you're just viewing, please put your name and your OpenStreetMap username in the Q&A, and I'll be able to capture that there. And then if you also look at this bottom link here, this Peace Corps mapping dashboard, I'm going to open that up and head back into screen share. So we have a group of like Harvard students built this for us at a hackathon last year. We're trying to update it and make it do more things, but for now, it's just a dashboard of things related to Peace Corps mappers. So this is right here where you can have all the information about how many people have contributed under the hashtag Peace Corps in the last 7 days, etc. But what I actually want you to do is go to this dashboard. Feel free to look around, but click this Join Us button, and then click the Join. It'll take you to a Google form. I wasn't able to post this on the links for some reason, but if you could also just sign in, register your username with us, that would be really helpful too, so we can track everything, do some monitoring and evaluation, which of course is always important in Peace Corps. And I'm going to send out a survey to you all after, so if you wouldn't mind just filling out the survey real quick, just about, you know, what you learned from the workshop, how it could be improved. That would be really helpful too, because you're only the second group that we're doing this with. So it's hard to know sometimes when you do virtual workshops if people are really learning anything, so this survey is really important to us. So once you've done all those things, signed in either through the chat or the Q&A, and then registered, you can feel free to stick around, you know, ask any questions you might have, keep mapping. I'm going to be here just mapping, or, you know, you can, if you feel comfortable, like you learned the skill, you can always get back to packing or whatever you have left to do.
What was that site again that you said to go to?
So that is in the showcase. It's that bottom one, the Peace Corps mapping dashboard. And then if you click join us, you'll be able to get to the Google form. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. How do I... Hold on.
All right. Do you want to share your screen with me, maybe?
Yeah, I got my screen shared.
Okay.
So, where am I going?
So if you see those like gold tags kind of on the left side of your screen?
Yes.
All right, so go ahead and click on those. Perfect. And then scroll down and click on that mapping dashboard.
Okay.
And then if you click join us and then join again, you should be able to get to the Google form. And if anyone's watching the recorded version, I ask that you also do that. That's just really helpful for our tracking purposes. So thanks, that's a great question.
Alright, I think I'm gonna head out, but the next one is on, the next one of these Hangouts is on Tuesday, right?
Tuesday, yeah. And it's going to be pretty much the same topics covered, so feel free if you want to join us as a speaker and like, even help teach other people this skill, that would be awesome. But I know you probably have a lot going on, so if you feel comfortable with the skill, also there's no pressure to come to the next one. So it's really up to you. But Tuesday from 1 to 3
Okay.
Eastern time. Yeah.
Alright, cool. Well, thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Alright, bye.
Bye. All right. Well, to everyone else who is on the call, I think we covered everything that I wanted to talk about today. Stop me if you have any last minute questions. You can also email me your questions. I hope that you signed in and wrote your name up in the Q&A so we can mark you as, having attended this session. And I hope that you, keep mapping and learning more about the geography of your soon-to-be capital city. I thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions about mapping or the tools we talked about today, or even if it's 6 months down the line and you're doing some mapping and you just need some support, feel free to please always email me. You have my email address, cclark2@peacecorps.gov, and I'm always happy to help you out.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.